Welcome back to your Bucks latest on FanArc. I'm Sam Shapiro. If you haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy, stop what you're doing right now. Use this QR code, download the app today, and get in on all the action. It makes following not just the NBA, but the NFL playoff action also really exciting to dive into right now. And when you use promo code BasketballFan, you can score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, that's promo code BasketballFan. Thank you again to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. Well, we've got a lot of mock trade related ideas to dive into in this episode of your Bucks latest, and I think a lot of them could be centered around the Miami Heat in this one. I know we've talked a lot about potential deals involving the Knicks and the Spurs. I really feel like out of the three teams that have the best potential to land Antetokounmpo in some sort of trade deadline scenario, even though it's not looking quite imminent yet that we will 100%, I don't think we'll really see that, at least at this trade deadline. But if any team has the best bet, I would say it's either the Spurs, the Knicks, or the Miami Heat. And since we dove into the other two teams I just mentioned, want to dive into Miami at least a little bit more in this episode because I think they have a number of assets that could be of value to Milwaukee, naming specifically Tyler Hero, who would be basically coming home, being the new face of the Milwaukee Bucks, really. Not saying that he's comparable anyway in any way, shape, or form to Giannis, but I think he would definitely have some sort of incentive to at least want to stay in Milwaukee to kind of let that scenario marinate a little bit in terms of what it would be like for him playing as a Milwaukee Buck in the NBA. So I think there are a lot of trade ideas you could explore. I think if the Bucks were going to trade or would want some sort of package from Miami, Tyler Hero would have to be almost a must considered in that deal. And then I think between Kel'el Ware, Jaquez Jr., I'm going to talk about Andrew Wiggins a little bit more later in depth in this episode. I think he could potentially be thrown in some sort of package, but I think that Milwaukee could also make the case to trade for him without a Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. And then, potentially offering, a Kasparis Yakuchones somewhere in that deal, as well as draft assets in the first round as well. So trade package that I could see kind of coming to fruition would be Giannis in exchange for something along the lines of Tyler Hero and Kel'el Ware, or Tyler Hero, Jaquez Jr., Yakuchones, and then maybe a draft pick as well. I'm not sure. But the fact that Miami would be giving up at least more than two players in some sort of deal also kind of seems like a bit much of an asking price, although you are trading basically the centerpiece of your franchise to the 305. So I think that Hero and Ware and maybe a draft pick could potentially warrant a good base for Milwaukee to, still stay somewhat competitive while giving up Giannis in the same trade, but also kind of give them a little bit of a building block going into the future in terms of that draft asset as well. But I think a trade, or at least somebody that Milwaukee could potentially get in a trade to build around Giannis, would be Andrew Wiggins, and they wouldn't necessarily need to garner a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade package in hopes of bringing Wiggins to Milwaukee. Now, I think that it's been reported from Brett Siegel that Milwaukee had been interested in bringing in Wiggins to build around Giannis. And when you put Wiggins at the 3 with that starting lineup, in addition to Antetokounmpo and Miles Turner, I think they definitely look a lot more threatening with Kyle Kuzma potentially on the bench, depending on the trade that they could potentially work out in this scenario. Now, I think that one mock trade that I saw that would bring Andrew Wiggins to Milwaukee involved sending Bobby Portis, Gary Trent Jr., and Gary Harris over to Miami in terms of a salary matching wise type of deal. I don't know necessarily if this would be in Miami's best interest, but hey, I mean, you're at least getting solid rotational guys at least at a similar position in Bobby Portis, rather bringing in Andrew Wiggins. So do I think this deal would necessarily be worth either team's time? I don't know if Miami would want to part with Andrew Wiggins just to acquire those 3 players, but I also don't know if the Bucks would want to give up that much of their rotation just to bring in Andrew Wiggins. I could maybe see, Bobby Portis and Gary Trent and or Gary Harris, like a 2-for-1 type of deal. But I don't think that the Bucks would necessarily have to give up Giannis Antetokounmpo in a deal that would bring Andrew Wiggins over to Milwaukee. Drop in the comments what you guys think, because I definitely think Andrew Wiggins could be a solid building block piece for Milwaukee coming into that starting five. And then again, in this scenario, you're not even touching Kyle Kuzma, who would be coming off the bench at this point. So I don't know. Definitely thought it was an interesting thing to kind of think about, considering that Milwaukee, especially over the summer when it seemed like Miami was on the fringe of thinking about trading Andrew Wiggins. It looked like if they were going to send him anywhere, it was either going to be the Lakers or the Bucks. So I personally don't think trading for those players from Miami's standpoint would necessarily be worth it, because I don't personally see Bobby Portis as a starter. I would maybe move Jaquez, up to the starting lineup, and then maybe have Portis and some of these guys come off the bench as well. But that's just my opinion. Before we dive into another trade that could potentially bolster the success of the Bucks, and this is kind of an interesting scenario I want to get into involving Jonathan Kuminga, going to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video over at Underdog Fantasy. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at the Sacramento Kings taking on the Detroit Pistons today. I'm selecting DeMar DeRozan for higher than 17.5 points and Cade Cunningham for higher than 25.5 points. Download the app today and use promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, that's promo code BasketballFan. And again, my picks for today, selecting DeMar DeRozan for higher than 17.5 points and Cade Cunningham for higher than 25.5 points. It's all on Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 helpline at 1-878 or text HOMI 467-369.
Well, Jonathan Kuminga recently demanded a trade out of Golden State. It was pretty prominent. He didn't want to play there, or at least wanted a bigger bag than what he was playing for over the course of this summer, and no teams really biting on that as well. But it seemed like Milwaukee was one of those teams that pondered at least the idea of bringing Kuminga in, and I don't necessarily know if that would be in Milwaukee's best interest, but there was one 3-team trade that I saw that would bring Kuminga to Milwaukee, and I think it could be in a very interesting scenario if you're looking at potential rebuilding packages that Milwaukee could acquire for the Greek Freak. Now, this 3-team trade that I stumbled upon over the course of this weekend does involve the Bucks kind of going through a major rebuild or reshaping of their roster, rather, because they're getting a lot from Miami in this 3-team trade, and then they're also getting Kuminga in this trade. So, 3-team trade would involve Miami, Golden State, and Milwaukee. Miami would get Giannis and Buddy Hield coming from the Warriors. Miami would send Andrew Wiggins to Golden State, but then they'd send Tyler Hero, Kel'el Ware, and Jaquez Jr. along with Kasparis to the Bucks, and then the Warriors would also send Kuminga over to the Bucks. So when you look at that, I mean, you're getting Tyler Hero, you're getting your hometown all-star here, or you're getting your hometown all-star, you're getting Jonathan Kuminga, who could kind of at least fill some sort of niche in the front court, along with Kel'el Ware, who could team up with Miles Turner down low, in addition to Jaquez Jr. and Yaku Chonez potentially coming off the bench or starting, depending on how you want your roster to shape up. Honestly, in this scenario, Milwaukee is getting a lot of pieces that can help them win right away. Might be a ton of assets for Miami to cough up, but you're also getting the Greek Freak and you're getting Buddy Hield, so I don't necessarily think that you're getting completely robbed. I think if you're Miami, I don't know if you would entirely go for this or not, just because you're giving up 4 well, you're giving up 5 players, excuse me, that are pretty important towards the success of the Heat right now. So I don't necessarily know if they would go for that, because at this point, when you're looking at Miami's roster, it's kind of, you've got Larson, you've got Jovic, you've got Adebayo, you still got Powell, which is great. And then you've also got Davion Mitchell, but you're taking a hacksaw to your roster in that trade. And that's why I don't know if Miami would be all in on it, although they are winning the Giannis sweepstakes, which I think they would kind of mold their roster to kind of build around Antetokounmpo for the next at least 3 seasons. And I think Powell, Antetokounmpo, and Adebayo could definitely be a really solid, I don't want to say veteran core, but players that have a number of years at least in the league in comparison to younger guys that they had talked about potentially bringing in a few seasons ago, or, generally trying to make their team a lot younger. But I think the Bucks ultimately get a lot out of this trade in addition to Kuminga. And I think Kuminga having to mesh with basically a Miami team that's comfortable together, all of them having to kind of start over in Milwaukee, could definitely be a good recipe for a rebuild, depending on what Milwaukee was trying to go for. It definitely, I feel like, has a little more reassurance in comparison to a type of deal they could go for where they're betting on, a ton of future draft picks to hopefully work its way out into, bringing in the next new face of this franchise. Circling back to teams that could potentially offer another solid trade package to Milwaukee. Again, I'm still pretty set on Miami, the Spurs, and the Knicks all offering good trade packages, but I think that the Mavs also have a lot to offer Milwaukee as well. I don't think Milwaukee should capitalize on this, because I think there's more reassurance with what either the Knicks or the Heat could offer, as I've kind of talked in this episode, but also when you look at what the Spurs have to offer in terms of the number of draft picks and young guys available. I mean, there's definitely a lot of promise there too. But the quantity of what they could offer also makes it, in my opinion, a high value trade package to look into. Anyway, I think Dallas, the Mavericks, have something that could be of value to the Bucks, and that's Cooper Flagg. Now, would Dallas trade Cooper Flagg? If you asked me this about around this time a year ago, I would have said absolutely not. But after watching the Luka Doncic trade, I would say at this point out of Dallas, anything could happen. With that in mind, potential mock trade I was looking at involves sending Giannis to Dallas in exchange for Cooper Flagg, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, Caleb Martin, Najee Marshall, Jaden Hardy, and a 2029 first-round pick. Now, I think that's a lot for Dallas to kind of cough up, and I don't know if they would be doing that. They would be willing to do that all in exchange for Giannis Antetokounmpo, but I could at least see 3 of those players going to Dallas, or 2 of those players in a draft pick to go along to Milwaukee. And obviously Cooper Flagg would have to be in that deal if it was going to be less than a 3-player trade. But I don't necessarily know if Dallas goes for this. It's not bad if you can get all of those players and a draft pick in Milwaukee. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't think that Dallas would trade 6 players. That's a bit much, but if it's at least 3 or 4, I mean, it's not the worst idea in the world. I don't necessarily know if that would benefit Milwaukee, but I think it also creates a solid base for a potential future rebuild. You're getting a number of assets. You're getting a draft asset. You're getting a ton of players that could, be worked into your starting lineup, but also come off the bench. I don't know. Drop in the comments what you guys think. I don't know if this trade package, again, I would at least put in the same regard to value-wise what it could do for Milwaukee in terms of what I think the Knicks, the Spurs, and the Heat could bring to the table. Just thought this was a bit interesting considering that with the whole Anthony Davis debacle, obviously now things for Milwaukee are going to look even more interesting. So are they saying tear down basically what we've got and try to start over and bringing in Giannis Antetokounmpo at this point? I don't think Milwaukee should entertain a deal like that in any regard because, again, the other 3 teams I had mentioned I think have a lot more to offer, but drop in the comments what you guys think. That's going to do it for today's episode of your Bucks latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We've got great daily content you don't want to miss all right here throughout the week. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro. Take care.